Hi and welcome, it's Terry Edwards, the Renegade Recruiter. I'm back for another episode of the Renegade Recruiter. My guest today is a legendary Greg Savage, who's got over 34 years recruitment experience. And Greg tells me that he looks very young and slim on it. Look, this is what you're going to discover today. You're going to discover why the term legendary caused much hilarity in the Greg Savage household. How Greg went from 0 to 100 million in recruitment. How this young, good-looking and slim, like I said, Greg's words, uses social media, a must-do for the recruitment industry. And why many recruitment business owners are letting themselves down and precisely what to do about it. Enjoy the podcast. Remember, if you want access to any more information, go to www.therenegaderecruiter.com. That's www.therenegaderecruiter.com. Enjoy the interview.
Warning, the Renegade Recruiter is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned.
Well, hello and welcome. This is Terry Edwards from Drew Coaching, the Renegade Recruiter, and welcome to this week's podcast. And this week we are joined by the legendary, and I mean that word, the legendary Greg Savage. So Greg, welcome to the Renegade Recruiter Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, and thank you very much for your vastly inflated introduction. I'm recording this or speaking to you from my study at home, and there are about 4 or 5 other people who live in this house, and none of them call me legend, so it's a great pleasure to hear you describe me in that way. It would cause a lot of hilarity around here, so let's keep it quiet.
I'll tell you what, before we started this, Greg insisted that I called him the legendary Greg Savage. So, no, seriously, Greg, within the industry, you really are a legend and well known. So, look, Drew and I are really looking forward to this interview. So, rather than me go on about what you do, can you just give us a brief overview of what you do now and a bit about your background, please, Greg?
Sure. Well, look, I am one of those people who fell into recruitment straight from university, and that was a long time ago. So at the risk of turning half your speakers or 80% of your listeners off, I started in recruitment in January 1980, and that was in Australia. I then spent a few years working in Oxford Circus in London for a company called Accountancy Personnel, which subsequently became the Hayes Group. And I came out with them back to Australia, ran their Sydney office, became a director of their Sydney business, or their Australian business, and I was only 27. It was at that time that Hayes bought the business. Long story short, 3 of us went out and started our own company. That was called Recruitment Solutions. And we started with 3 of us in a room, and 11 years later we listed it on the Australian Stock Exchange with 250 staff and an enterprise value of about $100 million. So that was an exciting journey. I learned a huge amount.
Awesome.
I took a few years off later, traveled the world a bit, and then I joined a company called Aquint, an American company, which is in marketing and creative recruitment, and I was the international CEO. That meant it sounded very impressive. There was actually 5 offices outside of North America with a turnover of about $5 million, but we grew that in the next 6 or 7 years to 35 offices across Asia, Europe, UK, and sales exceeded $100 million US. So that was another very, very exciting and interesting, fascinating experience learning about opening offices in the international arena. Literally, as I said, I think it was 17 countries we covered. And then when the downturn came in 2008, it opened up an opportunity for us to engineer a management buyout, which we did, a friendly one. But Aquint remained a shareholder of this new company we set up called Firebrand, which had 10 offices in 8 countries. And I was the major shareholder of that, and we grew that business, and I sold my shares in 2012, which has left me in the last 2 years to act as an advisor to the recruitment industry, which sees me on the board of 12 recruitment companies now, which is absolutely a privilege. It allows me to look into what these businesses are doing. I like to think I help, but I also learn as much as I contribute. And I consult a number of companies. I'm very fortunate I get invited to speak at recruitment conferences all over, well, the world, really. I've got this UK thing coming up, which I'll tell you about later, but I've been all over Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Asia, and I'm going to the Czech Republic, of all places, on the way to the UK. And again, that gives me a brilliant opportunity to understand what's going on globally. I'm very, very fortunate. So I've obviously had a lot of experience, but so have many other people. I think my point of difference these days is the privilege of seeing what other people are doing and learning. And I've also invested in 3 or 4 companies that I take obviously a particular interest in. So I'm very much hands-on from that point of view. So that's where I'm at the moment, Terry. It's great. I have all care, no responsibility. As I tell my clients, I'll do everything I can to help you, but I will not have sleepless nights about your company, because that's what I've had about my own company for 30 years. It's not the world's best sales pitch, but it seems to work.
So you've got 34 years recruitment experience, Greg, according to my calculations. That sound about right?
Yeah, it's about 34, 35. You wouldn't believe it if you saw me, Terry. I'm young, I'm slim, I've got a full head of hair. But it is a lot. It seems it is hilarious, really. It is crazy, and it's actually interesting in this sense, and that is that in many respects I'm very much an old school recruiter. I still believe in the craft of recruitment. I still believe in influence. But ironically, I reckon I know more about technology and social media than pretty much 99% of recruiters half my age. And that's not because I'm clever, because I'm clearly not. It's because I've made it a point of a must-do point for myself. I've made it a fact that I need to understand these things because that's where the industry is going. And that actually brings us on to something we'll talk about later. It's where many recruitment owners are letting their businesses down. They are burying their heads in the sand about technology and big data and social media and CRM and a lot of things that they need to get their heads around. And so 34 years or not, I think there's a place for continuous learning in this business.
Excellent. So, Greg, I'm gonna embarrass you now. I agree with you 100%. You are kind of seen as the king around social media, and you understand social media inside out. I'm going to say, folks, about 10 minutes before this interview started, Greg had some massive challenges around headphones. So it's not all technology, is it?
Oh, mate, look, let me tell you. While I say I know a bit about technology, I still have to get my son to come and help me switch my iPod on. I mean, don't worry about that. So, no, I think I'm not a technician. I think I understand how technology plays into recruitment and talent acquisition.
Yeah, seriously, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
But 34 years, you've got more years' experience in the recruitment industry than Drew. I mean, Drew, what are you now? 14, 15? I can never remember. I know I'm dad, but
I'm 27.
27. But that is awesome, Greg. Absolutely. We've got so many questions to ask. But before we do, though, Greg, before we get into that, again, I know we've spoken off the record. Tell as people are listening, tell us something about you which many people don't know about.
Well, most of those things I don't propose to share on a podcast, and I don't propose to share in the confines of my family home. So I'll think of something fairly bland. But most people wouldn't know. I was born in South Africa in the apartheid era, and grew up in that era, and learned many things. One of which was how to play rugby. Now, I'm not a very good rugby player. I'm what's described as an enthusiastic rugby player, but I played it for 30 years. I played it from the age of 5 to 35. I played it all over the world. And this is getting onto the part where most people, well, no one would know this. And in fact, I told my sons this the other day, and they didn't believe me. And one's 18 and one's 15. I told them the truth, which was that in about 1980-something, I was selected to play for South Australia, which is one of the Australian states. The weakest one in rugby because they play AFL there. And I was selected to play 3 games. And before I was dropped, like a hot potato. I played 3 games, and then I was dropped on the bench of the 4th game. I was put on the bench as a reserve. And do you know who the 4th game was against?
No idea.
It was South Australia playing the All Blacks.
Oh,
and
wow.
In those days, the try was worth, hold on to your hats, 3 points. And South Australia still lost 76. They still lost 76-0. And
I suspect because you were afraid, Greg.
To my eternal gratitude, my sons didn't believe me, but one of them sort of half believed me and said, "So you must have been upset you didn't get on the field." And I said, "Mate, I was delighted I didn't get on the field." So that was my very inglorious rugby career. My other games were against Victoria, ACT, and Western Australia. And, it's called the Southern States Carnival. Basically, it's the 3 or 4 states in Australia that don't play rugby as a major sport. They were having a playoff. And in those good old days when national rugby teams used to tour a country, you might remember if you guys are rugby fans, years ago, the Wallabies or the Springboks or the All Blacks, they'd tour the UK and they stay there 3 months and play everybody.
That's
now,
right.
Of course, that doesn't happen. And that's what happened in that era. The All Blacks toured Australia and they played one game against South Australia, 76-0, which in today's scoring would have been like 120 probably. So I was very grateful, and I had already devised a plan that should I be called onto the field, I was going to suffer a hamstring injury as I sprinted on. That was my plan, because I didn't want to face up to those guys.
Well,
anyway,
I know rugby very well, Greg. I'm actually from Rugby Town itself. That's where I was. That's where I went to school, and in rugby, and I'm going back many years as well. When I was at school, you weren't allowed to play football or soccer. You had to play rugby. So everybody played rugby in the good old days. Of course, now they play football, soccer, and hockey and everything else. But yes, I know rugby very well, and I know because we spoke again off the record. Your son at the moment is over in the UK, I believe, for the Ashes. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, he is. Well, he's actually there. He's 18. He's there doing a gap year. He's working at a school in Hampshire and coaching sport, which is one of his things, and music, which is his other thing. But now it's the July-August school holidays. So he is following the Australian cricketers around in between chasing friends. I suspect female ones around Croatia or something. The last I heard was a picture of him with Michael Clark. I think I sent it to you, who he met in the street in Cardiff. And I had a chat, and he sent me this thing informing me that he was giving Michael Clark a couple of tips about his cover drive. So that was interesting.
Excellent, fantastic. And look, back to recruitment and what's going on in the recruitment industry. It's the nicest way, but you've been around for some time now, 34 plus years. What do you see as the biggest challenges recruiters are facing in today's market?
Mate, the reality is that the biggest challenge is that most recruiters don't understand what the challenge is. So let's break it up into owners of recruitment companies, and then we might talk about recruitment consultants if you like. But
yeah,
my biggest concern, and I touched on this, is that I think pretty much anyone who owns a recruitment company, be it a 2-person business or a big one, knows that there are massive changes afoot. They know that clients' expectations are changing. They know that candidates' behavior is changing. They know that technology is impacting their industry. They're feeling margin pressure. They're faced with shortages of jobs in some markets and shortages of candidates in others. They know that it's all different. The smart ones can even look around and go, my goodness, every other industry is being affected. Look at the music industry. Terry, you're old enough. You used to buy music in records. Then you used cassettes. Then we had DVDs or CDs, and then we download it. Now my kids don't pay for music. They steal it from somewhere off the internet. So I don't know where.
That's right.
The taxi industry's been disintermediated. The hotel industry, we've got Airbnb, the travel industry. We know in our hearts, in our industry, that it is changing. But the biggest problem people have is they do not know how to address it. And as a result, most of them are putting their heads in the sand and saying, let's do what we've always done, but do it harder and better. And so you've got the crazy situation, guys, of people getting better at things that they should not be doing at all. Right?
Great point.
They're getting better at making cold calls and writing ads for job boards. And man, if that is not yesterday's tactic, then I don't know what it is. So that's the biggest challenge. Of course, we can drill into 1,000 other challenges, if you wish.
So to sum that up, they're doing the things that they really shouldn't be focusing on.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a little bit more meat on that. So, for example, I mean, I go into companies and you know, I'm on the board of 12, right? So that's the inside. But I also get to speak to. I mean, I can't walk down the street in Sydney without someone stopping me and saying, "Let's have a cup of coffee." And I can promise you, it's not rugby they want to talk to me about; it's recruitment. And what I'm finding is they're training their consultants and KPIing their consultants to do things that are not driving the business forward. For example, they've got more jobs than they know what to do with. All those jobs are in competition and contingent, and they've got their people going out winning more jobs. And I'm saying, but hold on, wouldn't it be smart to invest in candidate acquisition tactics? What are your strategies? Oh, no, we've got job boards and we've got LinkedIn. Well, I'm here to tell you that those are old school tactics, including LinkedIn. I consider LinkedIn to be old school. I'm not saying these things don't work. I'm saying they're becoming increasingly ineffective. I'm also saying they are available to everybody. So you come from rugby in England. I could go to rugby in England, and I can run an ad on a job board, and I've got LinkedIn. So I'm no different to the average recruiter in rugby, because most of them have not developed a variety of tactics to access candidates. The future of recruitment, or the now of recruitment actually, guys, is accessing candidates that your competitors can't get, but more importantly, that your clients can't get. And no, you're not going to win that battle by going to job boards. You've got to come up with far more innovative strategies, so which opens up a whole long discussion that I'm quite prepared to go into if you wish. But so I when I look at my businesses that I talk to, some are doing extremely well. I'm actually very positive about the recruitment industry, Terry. I think the future is golden for some of us. I think others will wither and die because they are not adapting to the new era.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You've made some excellent points there, and I think the one that's kind of struck a chord to me is that the ones that are not adapting will wither and die, sadly. And I know we can go into this in a lot more detail, but could you just give us like a headline or an overview of some of the other methods that a recruiter can use for accessing candidates, please, Greg?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the future for a successful recruitment company is where the owners and managers of the recruitment business devise a strategy to tackle talent acquisition in concert with the activities of the recruiter. So there is some of the recruiters in their team. So there is some responsibility that's corporate, and there's some responsibility that's individual. And let's just have a look at them. So if you're thinking about what I'm talking about in corporate is we've got to, yes, have a database of candidates. But here's something for you, a headline for you. Most recruitment companies' databases are candidate graveyards. What I mean by that is, look, sometimes the people actually are dead, literally, and that's sad. But sometimes they're dead because the recruitment company has no way of accessing them. They're not engaging with them. They're not using CRM, right? Candidate relationships, that stands for customer relationship management, but I call it candidate relationship management. They're not using automated marketing. Let me give you an example, Terry. I'm sitting in my home here, and up the road is a bottle shop called Northbridge Cellars. Well, I got an email from them the other day saying, Mr. Savage, we think you've run out of Shiraz. Would you like us to send you another case? And they were bloody right. And how do they know I've run out of Shiraz? Because they sold me a case of Shiraz 3 times in the past, and they've got it on their database, and they've worked out that about now I would have run out of Shiraz. Actually, if their database had been smarter, they would have realized it would have taken just 1 week. And but the point is, that unsophisticated tiny business with 2 people sitting in it has got better CRM and automated marketing than giant recruitment companies. Yeah. They have got a customer database, and they're interacting with me. They sent me an email saying, we think you've run out of Shiraz. I clicked a button. They had the stuff on file. I bought the Shiraz. It was delivered that afternoon.
Awesome.
Okay? So they got a sale through CRM. Now, so companies need to develop CRM. They need to get serious about social media. The misunderstanding, the blindness of recruitment company owners about what a social media is all about is staggering. Social media is about building a brand and building a community of candidates you can tap into. It's about tapping into people who you will not get from job boards, that you can engage with, that are not on your database. It takes a lot of hard work. We're not going to have time to cover that whole thing here today. But that's another tactic that they would use. But as far as the recruiter is concerned, the way I like to think about it is this. An average recruiter needs to have two broad skills, or two broad ways of approaching it. They need to be skills hunters, and they need to be talent magnets. Now, these two words mean something. When I talk about a skills hunter, think of the concept of a hunter. That's the word, right? A hunter is somebody who goes out into what looks like an empty desert or a forest. There's nothing to be seen, but comes back with the prey. And that is the image. That's the metaphor. They need to be excellent at Google search, at LinkedIn search. They need to be excellent at Boolean search. They need to be excellent at social media search, how to use Twitter. I can use Twitter so can everybody, by the way, but I can use Twitter from here to find a UX designer in Rugby in England. I bet you I'll find one on Twitter, and then I'll be able to headhunt them.
Yeah.
But most recruiters don't have those skills, right? So it's about being and then it's, of course, the engagement skill. It drives me absolutely crazy how many recruiters think that headhunting someone is sending them an email on LinkedIn. That's spamming someone. How about using the telephone? How about phone sourcing? How about going out and hunting down great talent? How about using, for example, you can go on Twitter and you can find out who's at various conferences you can head out. There's a range of things. I'll speak for hours on this topic. But that's the hunting skill which most recruiters don't have. Then the other word I used, or the other phrase I used, was to be a talent magnet. And that's the reverse. Having said that each recruiter should develop a wide range of proactive skills to go out and hunt talent down, the other thing is to be so strong in your niche and have such a strong brand as an individual that you attract talent to you. And you can do that on LinkedIn. Here's a statement that most people would think I'm crazy about, but that's not a new experience for me. LinkedIn is more of a branding platform than it is a sourcing platform. You should be building your brand on LinkedIn. I mean, if you look, I put a status update on LinkedIn every day. I schedule them months ahead. But I come back from a day's work and there's 50 comments on some of these things. There's people, and as a result, when LinkedIn will tell you this information, of my 9,000 contacts, most of whom are recruiters, my LinkedIn profile is the most viewed profile amongst all 9,000. Now, I'm not even trying. I don't really care. I'm not a recruiter. I'm not even trying. But most recruiters are not building their brand, which you build in both real life and online. So that if you were in a niche, if you were in the city or the town of Rugby placing accountants, you should be so strong in that brand that every accountant in Rugby has heard of you. And that is possible through digital. But very few recruiters and very few recruitment company owners are investing in building the brand of the individual. So these are some, just scraping the surface, Terry, of the sorts of activities. But what you find, I'm going to pause for a minute so you guys can ask another question. But what you find is that when you go into recruitment companies, are people doing this? No, they're not. What are they doing? They are spending more and more money on job boards and getting more and more bloody plumbers from Mumbai or Lagos or Adelaide, irrelevant people applying for UX designer jobs. Then they think they're busy. They're pretending to their boss and to themselves that they're busy because they're screening 400 irrelevant job board applications.
Yeah,
it's a slippery slope to recruiting hell. You know, it's just ridiculous. So we've got to, if I was a recruitment company owner, I suppose I am in some ways, but I try not to do much work. If I was trying to do a lot of work, I would focus on getting people working on the right activities, and I've touched on a few of them in the last 5 minutes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Greg. Greg, one of the things that you mentioned that you do now is that you want to help recruitment business owners without having those sleepless nights. But I mean, I'm assuming that sort of during your sort of 30 odd years experience, you've had those sleepless nights when you did run your own business. Can you tell us about a time perhaps where things weren't going so well and perhaps the shit hit the fan and just tell us, about what was going through your mind when things weren't going so well and more importantly, what you learned from it and how you overcame whatever that challenge was?
Yeah, mate, look, you talk about 35 years and we can, when I gave my intro, I shared with you all the magnificent things I've done. I left out the wide range of cataclysmic cock-ups I've made along the way, of which there are quite a number. Some of them have been forced on me and some of them have been entirely self-generated. But I'll tell you a quick story. So we had a massive recession on Australia in the early 90s. Recruitment Solutions, the company I started, had grown from nothing to 30 to 70 people. We had 5 offices. We were turning over about $13 million. We thought we were kings of the world. Then Australia went to the world, but Australia particularly went into a massive recession. Not dissimilar to the one we had in 2008, which affected the UK dramatically too, but probably more severe. Here's a statistic for you. This was so long ago that people used to fax me things. We didn't have the internet. And on a Monday morning, all 5 officers would fax me their job numbers. And I remember I would then total them all up. And I remember we were averaging, in the beginning of that year, about 220 permanent orders open each week. Within 6 months, guys, get your head around this, that number had dropped to 18.
Wow.
From 220 to 18. And most of those jobs were things like internal auditors in the Papua New Guinea Highlands. They weren't even really fillable. So it was a cataclysmic drop in permanent revenue, which we've seen since and which we'll see again. Now, there are two reasons. There are 3 reasons why we survived that. 80% of recruitment companies, I'll repeat that, 80% of recruitment companies went bust in 1991 and 1992 in Australia. 80%. The reasons we survived are we had a substantial temporary business. So it dropped too, but it was a cushion of revenue that at least kept us going when permanent disappeared. Number 2, we had no debt.
Okay.
And number 3, we cut our costs fast and aggressively. We closed 2 offices. We reduced our staff from 70 to 35. We did a whole range of other things. And those are the things that allowed us to get through that downturn, and it also put us in a magnificent position when the market picked up. And I'll say this with no sense of joy, it's just a fact, but most of our competitors had gone bust. And as a result, when the market picked up, we just thrived, and our business grew to, I can't remember the figures now, but at least $50 million turnover, and allowed us to sell it via an IPO, which was pretty unusual in Australia at that time. So those were some things. But, I mean, if you want to list all the mistakes I've made, they are many and varied. Some of them would include, I don't know how you want to approach this, because it's the same answer to what good recruitment managers should be doing now, but it's the way you manage consultant activity is key. It's building a second tier of management as your company grows. That's key. It's hiring right. That's absolutely key going forward. I can see a lot of owners of recruitment companies hiring the wrong sorts of people. The sorts of people who are, I like to call them yesterday's heroes. They used to bill in the old environment that they're not going to bill going forward. One of the hugest mistakes I've ever made, and I continue to make it to this day because deep down inside I'm not a bad person, and that is I retain mediocre people too long. Living with long-term mediocrity is what screws company profitability. You've got to look at the opportunity cost. I'm not saying hire and fire. I'm actually saying hire, right? Then train aggressively, invest all your time and energy in the first 3 to 6 months someone's there. So if they can't make it, it's because they can't make it. It's not because you haven't trained them. What I often see is, we can't let them go because we haven't trained them properly. And then the person limps along for 12, 18, 24 months, and every time we're about to fire them, they have a good month. Then we say, no, they've made it. And then they have 3 disastrous months. And then eventually they leave, having lost us buckets of money and absorbed management time. These are the sorts of mistakes that I still see everywhere, all of which I've made, don't get me wrong, but I see it happening all the time.
And those mistakes that you just mentioned there about mediocrity, and accepting mediocrity with consultants, I'm sure you're well aware, Greg, going on at this very moment. Drew and I hear it every day of the week. And the old 80-20 where most, I'll say 100% of recruitment and search firms will have about 20% of their consultants who are underperforming. And as you said there, the great word you used there, they limp along. And
it's a big issue. It's a big issue. And I think when I have conversations with even experienced owners of recruitment companies, and they say things to me like, well, we're only paying her 80 grand and she billed 150 last year, so she's covering her costs. And I'm saying, no, mate, she's not covering her costs. Because people don't understand the cost of seats. And what I'm talking about is if you pay someone $80,000 in Australia, you're then paying 15% on costs in various government taxes, so that takes it up to $100,000. But you've got to look at the cost of having that person sitting in the seat, not including her or his salary. And that cost is the cost of running the business. divided by the number of consultants in the team. And that will come in Australia to $100,000 and in England to about £50,000. Now, I say this in conferences and people poo-poo me, and then I get them to stand up and calculate it. And the way you calculate it is you take your P&L, and you take your P&L for a year. And out of that P&L, you subtract the consultant salaries. You subtract the salaries. You leave the salary of the manager and the admin staff in, because those people are there to support the consultants. And then you divide that number you've got less, the total expenses, by the number of people in the team, the number of recruiters in the team. And that number will be, I tell you now, 80 to 100,000 Australian dollars, or 40 to 50,000 pounds for any company of more than 6 to 8 people. And so what you've got to say is, if I've got someone sitting in my seat, it's costing me, I'm going to speak Australian dollars for a minute. It's going to cost me $80,000 salary. It's going to cost me $15,000 in on costs, and it's going to cost me $100,000 in cost of seat. That is 200 and whatever it is. I can't add it up because I'm a recruiter, not a mathematician. $215,000, which if they don't bill, I'm going backwards. And when you start to think like that, and you've got someone consistently billing 160, if you're going to build a recruitment company to act as a charity to finance underperforming consultants, I suggest you don't do that, but put your money to the Save the Children Fund, because if you're going to give your money away, that's a better way to do
it. I love it. Certainly not pulling back at any punches. That is fantastic and so true. And, something that we often say, well, if you're a registered charity, let us know, and we're actually registered. Your company is a registered charity. But sadly, so many firms do just that and do that calculation. The other one I would add to that is also the cost of lost opportunities. If you've got an underperforming consultant, there's an opportunity there to bring in a performing consultant, and they don't calculate for that either. And what's that costing them as well?
Look, that's exactly right. You need to remember, if you go back to that cost of seat thing, if you have an underperforming person sitting in that seat, it costs you $100,000 for your consultant to put his or her delicate derriere on your seat before you've paid their salary. If that person's underperforming and you replace them with a top performer, that top performer does not cost you any more. They still take the same share of rent, the same share of beer on a Friday, the same share of your insurance cost. They don't cost you any more. The only way they cost you more is a higher share of commissions. And I love paying out commissions. It's my happiest day, because if you're paying out commissions, you mean you're being successful, as long as you have a commission structure that's appropriately worked out, which again is another 1 hour conversation we can have if you like. But as long as you've got that right, then you should be celebrating when you're paying out bonuses, because that means it's working. Yeah.
So you've shared there some of the things that recruitment and search firm managers can do in terms of underperformers. Here's a question for you, Greg. What, in your opinion, are the traits of a top biller or a good recruitment search consultant?
Okay, well, I'm going to choose to answer that question by describing what I think the recruiter of the future is. And by the future, I mean now, right? Not the old school recruiter. And this is important stuff, and it's 100% original. And by that, I mean not that anything I'm saying today is not original, because I'm making it up as I go along. But what I mean is I've given this a lot of thought, and I've changed my view on who I would hire and who I do hire. And I would say then that, guys,
Greg, just sorry to interrupt, but just let you know, Greg, what you're going to share with us now. If it's really good, Greg, we will use it, and of course we will take full credit for these traits that you're about to share with us. So let me just thank you in advance for that, Greg.
Yeah, well, good luck to you, but because what you need to be is you need to have the content, and you need to have the ability to communicate it, which I have, as you can see. So you steal away, it'll never be as good as Greg Savage delivering it. Okay. Sometimes I amuse myself. Okay, so the thing here is that we've got recruiters whose skills need to be in 4 broad areas, and they are these. A great recruiter going forward will be a sourcing genius. So what I mean by that is that's broken into 2 areas. They will have the skills to find people on the internet, to do digital search, all the things I described. It's almost a geeky kind of skill. It's like an ethical hacking skill. And actually, I'm jumping way ahead, but I actually believe we need to break the recruiter job down into different people, but I'll come to that later. So certainly one of the core components of success in recruitment is digital search sourcing, right? Which most recruiters do not have. Most recruiters cannot even use LinkedIn properly, let alone more sophisticated search. But that is a geeky skill, as I said. The second half of sourcing is what I call the engagement part, which most recruiters lack as well. Most recruiters, when they think they found somebody, most recruiters do not even engage in thinking about finding people. They wait for people to come to them. And any recruitment business or individual whose model is based on candidates proactively coming to you is destined to fail, because you'll only get second division candidates that way, or largely. If you're going to go for the A-grade players, you have to go and find them, as I said earlier. And to do that, you have to identify them. So a recruitment skill that's key is identification, which is largely a digital skill. But the second half of it is what I call the engagement part, the seduction. I believe recruitment is about seduction of candidates. The best people out there are going to have lots of job offers, lots of people approaching them. They're not going to go to job boards. They're not going to come to recruitment companies because they see us as a grudge purchase in the first place. So we have to seduce them. And that means engaging on social media, using appropriate tactics, phone calls, to invite them for a coffee. It takes time. One of the issues about recruitment industry is that we're so short-term focused. We want to go to job boards because they give us candidates today. But as I'm fond of saying to people, you're still going to be in business in 6 months, so why not invest in tactics that will generate candidates in 6 months as well? And that's where social and all these other things come in. So you've got identification, you've got engagement. That all comes under the heading of sourcing. The second area that I like to talk about is brand. Recruiters need to be brand builders. Now, I'll give you an example. So I'm going to the UK, as you've mentioned, Terry. I'm speaking for the REC in October. 250 people have signed up already. 250. That's in 3 months. I have no mailing list there. I've got no profile there except the profile that's been built on social media. If you like, I've got a brand. I know it's a bit of a wanky thing to talk about, but I have. And people are going, oh, this Greg Savage is turning up. I've read he seems like a vaguely credible guy. Let's go and see what he's got to say. Now that is what that's within my niche, right? Which is recruitment. Yeah. But as I said before, if you're placing UX designers in London, or you're placing architects in Rugby, or you're placing lawyers in Edinburgh.
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed Podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we lost you then. No, just carry on, mate. We did lose you, but you're back now.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that, I'll make it short. People need to build their brand, and there's a whole lot of things you can do to do that. It could be on Twitter, it could be on by blogging, it could be using LinkedIn, variety of things. So you've got the first thing, which is sourcing. The second thing is branding. The third thing is the craft of recruitment. This is a phrase I use, guys, which what I mean by that is it's an old school skill. It's influencing skills, which recruiters have lost because our business has been dumbed down. The irony is that digital, which is so important in one respect, technology, has dumbed down our ability to influence people. I was sitting opposite a recruiter behind her the other day. I looked over his shoulder. She's typing an 8-paragraph email. I said, who's that to? She said, it's to a candidate. I said, why? She said, I'm trying to convince this person to go for an interview. She's compiling an 8-paragraph email. Why not pick up the phone and engage with that person? Why not have a coffee with her? The influencing skill, it's all those getting a candidate to go for a job, handling a counter offer, getting a client to raise the salary so that it's fillable. All these little, we say clients don't talk to us, candidates want us to text, but we have collapsed back to the lowest common denominator, which is the easiest thing to do and the coward's way. So we don't have to deal with a client on the telephone or face-to-face. It's all email and digital. And that's not, you cannot influence someone. So the craft of recruitment, right? Even the interviewing of a candidate, I'm sometimes sitting on interviews, I'm horrified how, yes, those consultants can interview for skills. They can work out their qualifications, but they're not working out their motivation. Will this person accept a counteroffer? Is this person really going to travel from, and I'll show you how good my geography of London is, from Forest Gate to Hounslow for a job? And the answer is no.
I'm impressed with that.
Even if I worked in London, I've got that tube map stuck in the middle of my head. Don't you worry about that. So even stuff like that, people say, oh, yes, she'll go to Hounslow. She said she would. And I'm saying, I don't care what she said, mate. She's not going to travel an hour and a half every day each way. So when you get her the interview and she goes there, she'll either pull out of the interview or she'll pull out of the job offer. No, she won't. But of course, so it's the craft of, and the final area that I call networking, but it's really sales, business development, growing your portfolio. But it's only one of the 4 skills, one of the 4 categories. It's very important, but even that has to be modernized. We need to be building a relationship with clients online and converting those to offline engagements. The people that lack these skills, they are really approaching it in an old school way, and that's why you've got so many people spending more time getting less results. I'm seeing a lot of recruiters. I saw it the other day. Somebody said, I'm going to hire this person. And I said, why? They said, oh, she's a great big biller. I said, how much did she bill last year? They said, 300,000. I said, what did she bill the year before? 400,000. What did she bill the year before that? 500,000. And I'm saying, are you detecting a pattern, or she's just having a bad run? Yeah, bad run for 3 years. She's on the slippery slope because she's old school. She's not, it's not about age. It's about attitude, and we see it all the time. So anyway, I gave you a very long answer to your question, but those are the skills I'd be looking for in recruiters: people who are connectors, who are digital, but who also have the craft of recruitment, the influencing skill, the persuading, the negotiating, the cry on my shoulder type of skills. These are still going to become increasingly important because clients are going to pay us for finding people they can't find themselves, and they're going to pay us for the ability to bring those people to the hiring table.
Awesome.
And where those skills are important.
Greg, just one to sort of push you deeper on one of the responses you gave. You mentioned branding in sort of the vital skills that a recruiter needs to have. When Terry speaks to recruitment business owners, at least here in the UK and the States anyway, when a recruiter talks about branding, what they're concerned with is their company colours, what their website looks like, their logo and things like that. But what you're talking about is having really building a strong following. Can you just explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, that's not brand. That's brand, what a creative person would say. I'm talking about brand being your reputation. Brand's your reputation. Brand's what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I mean that as a company. And the only problem is that because of social media, they don't say about when you're not in the room. They say it in real time on Twitter. And they say, that's a shit recruitment company. They didn't return my calls. And they do say that. And so, what I'm talking about brand is, and the brand of the individual is, so I'll give you an example, and it's going to sound like I'm big noting myself, and I'm not. It's just a great example. I will go to England, or I will go and give a talk in Melbourne or in Auckland, and there'll be 200 recruiters in the room. And I'll do this exercise. I'll say, who in this room knows me personally? And 3 people will put their hands up, because that'll be about right. We've met and we've had a beer. And then I'll say, but who in this room has read a blog of mine, engaged with me on Twitter, follows me on LinkedIn, and 90% will put their hands up. That is brand in action.
Yeah.
Right? Those people know me, but they don't know me. But they have an image of me, which might be fabricated and untrue, but the image they have of me is this guy knows a bit about recruitment and it's worth me spending £180 to go and see him. And that is brand.
Yeah.
And so what we need to teach people to do is and really what you're trying to do with your brand is to build up a picture in people's mind that you are more than just a bucket shop, that you are a thought leader in your sector, that you have deep knowledge in your sector, that you know where the best jobs are, that you are reliable, that other people use you. What you want is people on Twitter and other places endorsing you in real time. So you want people saying, go to Drew, he's the best recruiter for accountants in Rugby. And they will do that. They'll also say the reverse. By the way, social media, here's a little thing for you guys to think about. Social media cannot cover up if you are a crappy recruiter. If you're a great recruiter and a great recruitment business, social media will amplify your greatness. If you're a crappy recruiter, social media will amplify your crappiness because people will talk about you negatively in the public domain. So brand for me is building your reputation.
Just on that, Greg. So I think to anyone listening to this or anyone that's read your blog, it's quite obvious to me anyway that you're plain speaking. You don't hold back. You sort of really give your opinions. I guess similar to Terry in a sense. Doing that, you're bound to get some people who don't agree with you, who do have a negative perception of you. How do you deal with sort of the quote unquote haters? How do you deal with people that don't like your style? Because again, I know sort of a lot of recruitment business owners will get the same thing when they put themselves out there, when they market. sort of more aggressively?
I don't really care. I mean, I don't get. I don't really give a fuck. You know. I'm 57 years. I'm 57 years old, and I'll tell you something. I've been in this industry all my life, and I've got a lot of friends, and I've got a lot of dear friends who used to work for me, and I can identify. So I think we worked it out. 33 recruitment companies that are now owned by people who used to work for me. And I can walk down any street, and if I see someone in the street, I don't have to hide behind a pillar because I've never cheated anyone or bullshitted anyone. They may not like me. They may not like what they've done. I've fired people. I've told them that they've got to lift their game, whatever. That's all good. As far as me speaking my opinion, I think it attracts people that may not agree with it. For the vast majority of people are civil in the way they disagree. On my blog, I've got thousands of comments on my blog, Twitter, and anyone who disagrees with me in a polite way, it can be quite contrary to my opinion, I engage in wholesome and fulsome and fun banter and discussion, and I have had my mind changed on things. If people are like, if somebody, and if you read my blog, some people are aggressive and rude, and I publish those blogs if they're rude about me. If they're rude about other people, I do not publish them. And I've had they're rude about other people on the blog or whatever. If they're rude about me, I publish them. There's very few. There's very few. But there's plenty of people who don't agree with me, and there's also plenty of people who don't sometimes appreciate the forthright manner in which I talk. That's absolutely true. But I don't care, because this is who I am. This is what it's about. I know that in the long run, I've helped many more people than I have upset. And, I get an email a day from somebody saying, they implemented my stuff or whatever. But in the end, I don't really care. I'm 57 years old. I'm sitting here. I'm so-called retired. And I've always spoken my mind. And it may not be right, but you can be absolutely sure it's what I believe. And that's enough.
Excellent, great. And look, for any recruitment business owners, as I listen to that, there's a massive lesson there. Because one of the biggest concerns for recruitment and search firm owners is, when we say to them, put yourself out there, become, as you said, Greg, the thought leader, the key person of influence. And their concern is, Terry, I'm concerned that some of my prospects may not like me. And our response is always the same. It's none of your business whether they like you or not. And you are going to get that, by the way. And really to literally grow some, because that's what's going to happen. And you've got to roll those punches and go, do you know what? Quite frankly, bollocks to them. Just get on with it, because you'll win more business than you actually lose. And you've really hit the nail on the head there. And I love your attitude, Greg. You don't really care.
But look, I used to run a recruitment business, and obviously I was, I'll be very honest with you, I would have been more circumspect when talking to my clients when I was running a recruitment business. I still gave my opinion, but when I'm talking to recruiters about recruitment, I'm simply sharing what I know, and I know I'm not right. I've been proven wrong. I've changed my mind on things. I've written blogs saying, got that wrong. But mostly, to be perfectly honest with you, mostly I am right. And that's why I've made a lot of money out of recruitment and had a lot of fun. Not perfect, but I'm quite prepared to live with people who say they don't like the style, they think I'm wrong. Mostly, to be honest with you, as I said before, mostly what I get is people disagreeing with my content, and I love that. Because if people weren't disagreeing with me, I wouldn't be saying anything very interesting, would I?
That's right.
So mostly that's what I get. Occasionally, I get people saying, you're too direct, you swear sometimes, and that's all true. It is true. And if you meet me in a pub, I will actually speak the same way. The only way I won't speak like that is when there are children around. But that's who I am.
Excellent. Greg, you've shared some real gems in this interview. Absolutely fantastic. I'm curious, Jeff, who's been the biggest influence in your business life, and why?
So I've been unlucky in that regard, because I've had a couple of managers that have been very helpful and influential in the early days. But you've got to remember, I started my own business, Recruitment Solutions, when I was 27, and since then I've been the boss. So I haven't had a lot of role models. There are lots of people I've learned from, colleagues. I remember John Schwong, who's the CEO of a company called Aquint in the US. I used to go there twice a year. I was the guy running their business outside of America. I learned a lot of things about them from him and them. Had a different slant on recruitment. It tempered my approach, so I'm very grateful for that. I've got a colleague called Graham Whelan who founded Recruitment Solutions with me. He is a humanist. He is one of the kindest guys around. He still recruits. He's in his 60s. He still does bills $1 million a year. I learned from him the value of empathy, and that it's not all about the money. It's about caring for people and doing the right thing on the way through. So all these people had influence on me, but unfortunately, I haven't had one mentor. I regret that. And the best answers I'd give you are actually personal ones. My father, who died a good 25 years ago, he wouldn't have had a huge impact on my career per se, except he did on my values. He was a different man to me. He would never have used some of the forthright language I do, even though he was a major in the British Army. He taught me about playing with a straight bat, about, which I'm trying to teach my kids. You just want to be the sort of person who never has to hide from anyone because you've cheated them. So I think I got a lot from him. And actually, my wife has been an incredible, she's my harshest critic in many ways, but she's also been a great sounding board over the years. So I've done some pretty crazy things, right? Opened offices in crazy places, done management buyouts, listed company on the stock exchange, sold and bought businesses. I'm no big deal. There's hundreds of people who've done much more than me, but I have done things which were quite scary in the context of my life and my family. And so she's been the voice of sanity quite often, and probably saved me from making even more blunders than I did.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Greg. That's inspiring. I understand you mentioned earlier that you're coming to the UK October, I believe. Could you tell us what that event? Tell us a bit more about the event and who's it for?
Sure. So there is a body, as you no doubt know, called the REC in the UK, and they are sponsoring this event. By that I mean making it happen and providing the resources. And what we're doing, it's on the 20th and sorry, let me just quickly. It's in October, and as far as the REC are aware, and as far as all the people coming are aware, I'm coming to do these speeches, and I am. But a more astute observer would notice that this is in the semi-finals week of the Rugby World Cup, and that's the real reason I'm
I suspected that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually quite cool because I got called up by a body. Anyway, long story short, I'm stopping in Prague to speak at a conference for Eastern European recruiters on the 14th, and then in London on the 20th, I'll be speaking in the morning on the topic of will the golden era of recruitment pass you by, and that is for 3 hours aimed at recruiters. And in the afternoon, the topic is something like building your business for profit and exit, and it's for managers. And so that is 2 sessions on the 20th. The recruiter one is already sold out. And as a result, they've scheduled another one on the 19th. So I believe that there is still availability for London on the 19th and the manager one on the 20th. And then the 21st is Manchester. Same 2 things. So if you went to my website, which is gregsavage.com.au, there is a tab there that says speaking gigs or something, and on there'll be a link to the REC website where you can jump on board. So I'll be speaking for 2 or 3 hours on the skills hunter, the talent magnet, what recruiters need to do, and then I'll be speaking in the afternoon for 2 or 3 hours to owners and managers about a lot of things, including the fact that I believe recruitment is merging with marketing, how we need to change the way we manage the business, the costs, and how to build a value in your business to exit, which I've done several times and learned a lot of lessons, and also bought about 10 businesses. So I've got a fair feel for where value in a recruitment business is. So that's what we'll be doing.
Fantastic. So that's 2 events, one in London and one in Manchester, you say?
That's right. So there's 2 events in each, actually, one for managers, one for consultants. And once that's done, I'll be moseying down to Twickenham to watch the Wallabies thrash England, I hope.
Seriously, have you got your ticket sorted for that yet, Greg?
I have. I'll be joining forces with my son, who will come up from Hampshire to watch those games with me. And so I bought package of the hotel and the tickets. Yeah.
Good man, excellent. Well, I'm also hoping to be be down there for the rugby as well. So who knows? I might even let you buy me a beer, Greg.
Oh, well, I'll be happy to buy a beer. The truth be told, of course, I'm kind of worried the Wallabies won't even get out of their group. So we live in hope. At the moment, we'll just focus on cricket, won't we, boys?
Well, all I'll say on that, Greg, it's early days. It's 1-1, and it is early days. So
yeah, it is early days, but the momentum has well and truly swung.
I can't argue with that. And I must hold my hand up and say that a few weeks ago I emailed Greg gloating and predicting the downfall of the Australian cricket team. What do I know?
Yes. I think I do remember that, and I think my words were, let's just wait a week, and here we are.
Yeah,
so, guys, is there anything else about... You sent me thousands of questions. Have we covered them all? Is there anything else you want to address?
That's fantastic. Greg, sorry, Drew, you got any more questions, Drew?
Yeah, if you could recommend just one business book that a recruitment or search firm owner must read, what would it be?
Yeah, you see that? I saw that question. I was dreading you asking that. I haven't read anything that I'd recommend, but I am writing a book which will be published next year, and that's the one they should read.
Yeah. So, do you have a name for it yet?
Actually, I have a brother, and he is not nearly as good looking or as talented, but he has got a stellar career in the PR and advertising industry, and he has done very similar things to me. Built advertising, PR, digital agencies. He was the CEO of Australia's biggest listed advertising agency, etc. And he and I have decided to sit down and write a book on how to grow professional services firms, because recruitment companies are very similar to ad agencies and PR companies.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that right now. We're going to launch it in a series of speeches around Australia and New Zealand in February. I don't think we've got a name for it yet, but that's, well, he's got a name, I've got a name, and so the battle will begin. And we'll have decided.
Really? What's your brother's name?
Sorry, I really haven't read anything. I tell you what I am looking at. To be fair, I bought the book by Andy Hedworth, who's an English guy, on recruiting via social media. It is next to my bed, and I'm just starting it now. I can't recommend it, but I do think he's very knowledgeable, and I'm expecting it to be very good. So it's on Amazon, and it's Andy Hedworth from Serona Consulting, and I follow his blogs, and I pick up a lot of tips. I do read a lot of blogs of other recruiter blogs. I listen to podcasts. Every time I do that, I learn something. So there's no question that there's a lot to be learned, but I tend to do most of my learning that way. And I go to a lot of conferences, often because I'm speaking, but then I listen to the other people. Cool. So I'm learning a lot that way.
Excellent. Just going back to your brother, Greg. What's your brother's name?
Chris Savage, and he has a website. He has a blog called Wrestling Possums. I know it's a crazy name, Wrestling Possums, and it's fascinating stuff. Actually, I hope he never listens to this, because I have never admitted to him that I've ever read it, but I do read it. It's quite good. But he is probably in his industry more successful than I've been in mine, potentially. But we thought we would put our ideas together. Between us, it must be 60 years of building service businesses. Him advertising, me recruitment. And so when we sat down, we realized that most of the issues are the same ones: people management, client engagement, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Gotta say, I'm expecting big things for the title of the book with a blog called Wrestling Possums.
Yeah.
Well, we got Wrestling Possums. We got the Savage Truth. There's a lot of things you can play up with a surname like Savage, So we are trying to be creative about it, but we'll see. We'll see.
Excellent. Greg, that was absolutely fantastic. You really are a legend, Greg, and you've shared some wonderful things with us, and so many things you can take away. I normally at this stage I try and summarize it, but there's so much that it's almost impossible to do that. So I'm just going to say thank you very, very much indeed, Greg. I know it must be what time is it there now, Greg?
It is 9:20.
9. Yeah. So
it's all good.
Yeah,
guys, it's an absolute pleasure. I feel privileged to have been on your what will we call this? A podcast?
It's a podcast.
Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure, and you caught me at the end of the day. I may have had 2 glasses of Shiraz over dinner, which allowed me to be even more verbose than ever. But no, it's a pleasure. It's really great. And I would say the best way to sum it up, Terry, is that anyone listening to this in the United Kingdom needs to get down to my talks there in October.
Absolutely.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah, and I am gonna promote it to our English clients and let them know all about it. And I'm also going to reach out to the REC and see if we can do there. But if you can just stay on the line for a second, Greg, while I just say goodbye. If you can stay on with us for a second, Greg. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter. Again, Greg, thank you very much. Drew, again, thank you very much. Some great questions as usual. Wishing you all continued success. Take care, take action, and be relentless. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed Podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.